We all love the glint of sunlight through the evergreens, the sound of a babbling brook. These things are deeply therapeutic and are why so many people seek out the wilderness of the Adirondacks. But for people with disabilities and mobility issues, a lot of it's out of reach. A new festival wants to flip that script and help all people feel welcome in the woods. That's today's story of the day.
Support for Story of the Day comes from Long Run Wealth, an SEC-registered investment advisor in Lake Placid, providing comprehensive wealth management, retirement, and financial planning solutions. LongRunWealth.com. And from SciTech Business Solutions, training and consulting services to help businesses grow. More information at citec.org.
Hey, I'm David Sommerstein. It's Wednesday, September 18th. First up, New York State has been hit by a record number of large-scale climate disasters so far this year, according to federal data. The New York Public News Network's Rebecca Rettelmeyer has more on what that means for the state.
Since January, New York has been hit by 8 weather events that each caused more than $1 billion in damages across the country. That's according to new data from the National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration, which tracks these so-called billion-dollar disasters. Many events affect several states. This year has already set a new record for the number of large-scale disasters to affect New York since records began in 1980. Arthur DeGaetano, director of the Northeast Regional Climate Center, says the state should be prepared for more destructive weather events in the future.
I think this is something we would expect to see going forward.
DeGaetano says climate change is likely fueling some of the uptick. Scientists don't know yet if an increase in storms, including tornadoes, is linked to climate change. But they do know that warmer temperatures make other weather events, like heat waves and flooding, more common. DeGaetano says that means New York has to prepare. This comes as environmental advocates wait to see if Governor Kathy Hochul will sign the Climate Change Superfund Act. The bill would require oil and gas companies to pay for some infrastructure upgrades to help the state withstand severe weather. Blair Horner is executive director of the New York Public Interest Research Group, which has advocated for the legislation.
The billion-dollar disasters that are impacting New York and the country, those costs are just going to keep going up. And right now, the public policy of New York State is to make the taxpayers eat the whole thing. And we think that that's wrong.
The Climate Change Superfund Act would raise $3 billion a year from oil and gas companies. The legislature passed the bill in June. Hochul has until the end of the year to sign it. In Ithaca, I'm Rebecca Rettelmeyer for the New York Public News Network.
A new air carrier is coming to the Ogdensburg Airport. According to the Ogdensburg Bridge and Port Authority, Breeze Airways received federal approval to provide daily direct flights between Ogdensburg and Dulles International Airport in Washington, D.C. on 138 passenger jets. The U.S. Department of Transportation had to approve the plan because Breeze will receive subsidies to provide the flights. Local officials voted to support Breeze. Officials say Breeze's plans align with the airport's vision to grow. That's as the airport is undergoing a multi-million-dollar remodel and expansion. Breeze will start flights on October 1st. Spending time outdoors is part of what draws so many people to the Adirondacks. But that experience can be out of reach for people with sensory or mobility issues. David Escobar reports on a festival that's adapting outdoor recreation to make it accessible for everyone.
Helene Gibbons is leading about 20 people on a walk at the Barnum Brook Trail at Paul Smith's Visitor Interpretive Center. She asked her tour group to close their eyes and listen to the sounds of bird chirps and the breeze hitting tree leaves.
And feel or sense how you're surrounded by an infinite variety of life forms.
She even leans into that forest soundscape to get her tour group to circle up.
So usually I call you back with an owl hoot, and it sounds like this.
Gibbons is a nature therapy guide for Adirondack River walking. She leads therapeutic walks known as forest bathing.
Our objective on the walk is to help connect people with nature in a more intimate way, slowing down, using their senses, because when we do, it makes us mindful.
Gibbons Tour Group is visiting the Vic for the first ever Adirondack Nature Festival for people with disabilities. The people attending today's festival have a range of needs when it comes to being in the outdoors. Some have visual impairments, others use wheelchairs. So Gibbons says she made sure each member of her tour group had the proper accommodations for the hike.
This trail that we used today is, the section that we used is ADA compliant. It means that it is easy, level, that the surface is free of rocks, ruts, roots, and so that as people who have mobility issues walk on the trail, they don't have to be concerned.
Along the trail, Gibbons talks about the things she hears, sees, and smells. She points out a birch tree stripped of its bark and holds balsam fir needles in her hand for hikers to smell. She says it's something she does for all of her tours, but can be especially impactful for people with disabilities.
It just feels like a more connected, complete experience.
That's Katie Carroll. She traveled from Albany to attend today's festival. Carroll is legally blind. She says the forest bathing tour allowed her to experience things she rarely gets to encounter in nature.
Well, one thing that I know is out there is that there are all these different kinds of trees and different leaf shapes. And I can see the color, so I can tell that there are different like greens out there, but I don't know why, and I don't know that what they are.
So Carol says having a guide to describe her surroundings is key to getting the most out of the outdoors.
You know, we encourage people to go out in nature and have a walk and all of the good things that come along with being outside and being in nature, and people are going to experience that differently. And so this just means that everyone gets to have a complete experience.
The forest bathing walk is just one of the ways the festival is connecting people with disabilities to nature. There's also bird watching, nature painting classes, and inside one classroom, nature sensory play.
A lot of times we'll put them together, so play yours and play this one. We make a little...
That's the sound of nature music. It's part of an immersive sensory workshop led by Suzanne Wyrick. She's inviting visitors to grab pieces of wood, leaves, and shelves off of a table to create drum beats. She says tactile experiences like this can be enriching for anyone.
Every table is set up for a sensory experience. So this is all forest music, for instance. So it's touch, it's hearing, it's smell, it's taste. So all of these different tables intermingle or specify one of those different aspects of the senses.
There are fragrant greens, textured tree barks, edible plants. Wyrick says sensory play with these pieces of the forest can give people a new perspective on how they can experience the outdoors.
It opens doors. You know, they might feel a stick under their foot and they go to pick it up and it's like, oh yeah, touching it, feeling it. So it brings joy. It brings you, it kind of returns you to that childhood sense of wonder and awe.
Wyrick says closeness to nature is something we all crave. And festival volunteer Minda Bryady says it's important that feeling is accessible to anyone.
This festival and these experiences are a way to make sure people, all people, feel included and seen and heard and cared about in the Adirondacks, because that's who we are.
Organizers say the Accessible Nature Festival is the first of its kind in the state. And after a successful first year, they're hoping to make it an annual tradition. David Escobar, North Country Public Radio, in Paul Smiths.
David Escobar comes to us from Report for America. He reports on diversity issues in the Adirondacks through a partnership between North Country Public Radio and Adirondack Explorer. We have more news all the time on our website, ncpr.org. Don't forget, you can listen to Story of the Day anytime you want, when and where it's best for you, by subscribing as a podcast. It's free, and it's delivered more than an hour before it's on the radio. Subscribe wherever you get your podcasts, or go to ncpr.org/podcasts for instructions. Music today by Danny Thomas of Canton and Tim Ellifritz of Johnsburg. I'm David Summerstein, North Country Public Radio.